Hey everyone, we're back for Peak Human. Feel like I do the same intro every time, but you got to go back, listen to the old episodes. I really have handpicked the best doctors, scientists, agriculture experts in the world, and I may not interview them again, so you have to go back to listen to them. I just finished one with Dr. Joel Kahn. Very interesting episode. He is a plant-based doctor. This is very cool. I'm glad he came to talk to me. We had a fun discussion. I let him say his piece. I let him talk like I usually do with my guests. He actually reposted one of my Instagram posts. He was very friendly. He's very open to different clean diets. He mentions paleo, carnivore, vegetarian, vegan as diets that he accepts. He says he's been vegan for 46 years. Here's a little bit more about him. Dr. Kahn obtained a BA in 1980 and MD in 1983 from the University of Michigan. He's a clinical professor of medicine at Wayne State University School of Medicine and associate professor of medicine at Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine. He is a founder of the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity in Birmingham Farms, Michigan. Kahn is a fellow of the American College of Cardiology and a member of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He's written books, has a podcast, does all the things. Check him out if you're interested in all of a sudden going vegan, and he's your man. Only slightly joking, but we did have a great talk about meat eating, ancestral health. What did our ancestors eat? What does the modern science say? The fact that we don't have a lot of modern science to prove all these animal-based diets, even though we know they're great. Check this one out. Level-headed vegan doctor. It's nice to have discussions with people like that. And we agreed on a lot on getting rid of the processed foods, and these are the problems. So enjoy this one with Dr. Joel. All right, we're live with Dr. Joel Kahn. How's it going?
Good day. Excited. Sapien.
Sapien. Yeah, let's do it. I'm also wearing my Eat Like a Human,
I
Eat
saw
Like a
that.
Human shirt.
I saw that going right for the message, right from the beginning.
Well, this is going to be a fun one today. I'm glad you made it on. You're a good sport. It's not like we're going to be arguing, I don't think. We're here for people's health. And why don't you just introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm a cardiologist, medical doctor. I'm in Detroit, Michigan area. I've been here pretty much all my life except for training, which took me to Dallas and Kansas City. But the Four Seasons, the Great Lakes brought me back family. I've been practicing cardiology for about 34 years. University of Michigan, University of Texas. I was at first what's called a cath lab interventional cardiologist, kind of a you got a heart attack, I got a balloon or a stent. I don't care if it's 3 p.m. or 3 a.m, and did thousands and thousands of those over 25 years. And then about 8 years ago, elective, no health problem, just a curious mind. Everybody thought I was nuts. I threw that all away. One of the larger, more lucrative practices in the city. Said, I'm going to rebuild myself as a preventive cardiologist. And I had a pretty long-standing nutrition background, but I went back and got certified in a lot of integrative approaches, mind, body, fitness, sleep, and through one of the major organizations, and became part of their faculty and part of a med school faculty. So it's all prevention all the time. And if you eat clean, we're friends. And if you eat crap, we got a problem. And that's the great bridge here.
I love it. Yeah. So we first met, you may not remember this. I think it was Paleo FX 5 years ago. Dr.
Great.
Sean Baker, you were on stage. And then afterwards, I came up to you and say, hey, I'm making a documentary about food. Would you want to be in it? And I think I got your card. And then we never ended up connecting over that, but we still can, maybe.
Absolutely. And when Sean Baker's on stage, I don't think anybody else is on stage. I mean, just his BMI overshadows everybody.
Yeah. Well, that was cool. I don't know if you guys had a little friendly debate on stage. I know you did a podcast as well.
Yeah, I've been on his podcast at least twice. That was our probably only on stage conversation / debate. I wasn't going to walk into Paleo FX as a long-time plant-based advocate and be a jerk. I mean, it wasn't the audience to do that. I talk about you guys behind your back, but not to your face. I mean, I've got principles. No, I don't talk about it behind your back. I actually Saladino, I don't know so well. I've been on national TV with him. It was staged to be contentious, so it was, they wanted TV fireworks for the doctor show, and you bring up a lot of the others I've been on. Dave Feldman, and I'm willing to talk to people. I certainly got my beliefs and recommendations, but my practice, because I still have an active practice, I've been vegan. I'll just declare this in my biography for about 46 years now, 100% plant-based human. But, maybe 50% of my patients are nearly there or there. And the others we work with and, encourage to eat as clean as possible. And, I see benefits from all of that. I just see American diets killing people.
Yeah. Well, so do I. That's the other way we got connected more recently was through Instagram. And I don't know if someone tagged us or you reposted something about, the junk people are eating. And someone in the comments was like, hey, this guy doesn't agree with you. And you're like, yeah, but we do agree on a lot of things because we need to clean up the diet.
Absolutely. I'll steal from anybody that has a good message.
Well, let's do it. Yeah. I mean, I am definitely in the animal-based camp. I'm no Saladino. I'm no Sean Baker. Uh, Friends with them. There's these guys that eat purely carnivore. Well, Saladino eats fruit and whatever else now, but never been in that purely carnivore camp. But I've definitely been in the animal-based camp for many years, seen all the benefits of that. And I don't deny you see a lot of benefits from getting people more plant-based, getting rid of junk. But I thought we could talk today. Well, we could go first, we'll go over what we agree with. And then it's just, how do we reconcile our different views? Do we have to? Do we have to, agree? Are we going to agree to disagree? Why can both things work? I want to know about your idea of human history and stuff like that, and how that relates to our diets today. And so maybe, yeah, I'd like to start with our stance, or what is your theory of health and what creates long-term health with diet? Like, what are you putting forward? And I could say what I will put forward first of all.
Sure. Well, I think, again, I don't know that your audience has heard what I'm about to say, and perhaps they have, but the reason there is, controversy, and I don't like the term food wars, but they're popular at conferences and gatherings. And I've participated in a lot of them. I sort of back out now because they don't end up changing much. They're just colorful enterprises. Is because everybody knows it. Nutrition science is hard. Drug science is easy. Maybe expensive, but it's easy. There's a new drug in development for one kind of cholesterol that's called lipoprotein little a. And maybe we'll talk a bit about lipoprotein little a because it's a passion of mine. Your audience should know about it. But just to get one drug to the market, maybe in 2025, to help people with one genetic disorder, lipoprotein little a, Novartis and other companies are going to spend over $1 billion. Well, in the history of the world, there's never been anywhere near $1 billion spent altogether to do nutrition science. There just simply isn't funding like that.
All right, everyone, check out nosethetail.org. This is my company. This is how we support the show. We don't have to have outside advertisers. Nosethetail.org, the best meat raised by my friends, Jessica and Austin Ham. In Texas, we get it to you through the mail. It's like Butcher Box, but better. Nose to tail. We got all the different cuts. We got bones. We got primal ground beef. It is awesome. We also have body care products made from beef tallow. Super clean stuff. Bit of essential oils. You don't want anything on your skin that you wouldn't eat. So check those out. Nosethetail.org. Thanks for supporting our small business. It's really cool to support our ranchers.
My nutrition guru, more than most, is a PhD at University of Southern California, Dr. Walter Longo, internationally famous scientist with some of the best publications. And he's had about $35 to $40 million of NIH grants, which is number one in the United States. But it's a drop in the bucket. And if you had some of those pharmaceutical dollars to study the questions, what's the cardiovascular consequences of the carnivore diet? What happens to the microbiome with a Paleolithic diet? Let's get state of the art now, we can define coronary anatomy with CT scans. And we talk about that too, because that's a passion of mine, with precision we've never had before. We actually could design a study of 500 people on 5 different diets that are studied a year later and compare their coronary anatomy to baseline and really answer the question, is there a difference in progression of plaque, regression of plaque? We could do that stuff now, but we got to fund it. And, it's not sexy to talk about diet compared to a new drug that might sell for $15,000 a year and recoup the $1 billion pretty quick. So Dr. Longo talks about the fact that because it is difficult, we have to use everything in our armamentarium when we talk about nutrition, particularly for longevity. His book, The Longevity Diet, is a good read for everybody. He's not vegan. He does certainly teaches a Mediterranean diet human, a lot of produce in the diet, a lot of produce. But he talks about, there's 5 pillars of longevity science, and I'll go quick with this. But you've got the randomized clinical trials, but there's very few large long-term randomized clinical trials in nutrition because it's hard. We've got this one called the Predimed study, which was 2 versions of the Mediterranean diet in Spain in 2013, and 7,000 people, 7 years. That was a miracle. They pulled it off. And then actually it sort of blew up because there were questions about the data once it was published. They had to revise it, retract it, submit it. Now it's cleaned up. And right now they've pretty much concluded a 1,000-patient heart study in Spain called CardioPrev, 2 different Mediterranean diets, very sophisticated 7-year follow-up. It's had very meaningful impact. But those are rare and they're very expensive. Then we've got centenarian studies. What do elderly, healthy people, a lot of people call that the blue zones, but not everybody uses that term. What kind of diet do they eat? And there is a diversity, but it does have a trend of being a very high fiber, high plant-based program, at least in Okinawa and some of the other regions. You got biochemistry. What does the biochemistry say about atherosclerosis, cancer cell production with saturated fat, with animal protein, with plant protein, with fiber in the gut or low fiber diets, vitamin C? So we got to use that. 4th is the one that people go cuckoo over, nutritional epidemiology. Papers published this week, something called the UK Biobank, I think about 120,000 people with dietary history and follow-up, as well as some genetic data, that if you eat a plant-forward diet rich in nuts, your risk of Parkinson's disease goes down 25%. Of course, these are associations. It's not a randomized study. That's what nutrition is full of. So you have to be cautious on any one study, like the recent PURE study, PURE, that reported 6 factors to reduce heart disease, one of which was full-fat dairy, and created a big uproar, whether that's genuine or not. But you got to take it one study amongst the whole. And the last thing he talks about is the big picture impact, the environment and animals and pollution and all the rest. And I know we fight about that too. But because of that complexity, that leaves us with, all of this disagreement, and we just don't have the funding to do those that 500 patient 1-year study that really wouldn't cost that much to pull off. Maybe it would cost $20 million, but compared to pharma, that's nothing. So, but my read and my biography really quick, I grew up in a home in Detroit where we honored certain dietary laws called keeping kosher. So as a kid, before I stuck a fork and put it in my mouth, I thought for a minute about what that was and whether that was pork and I wouldn't eat it, just based on religious background, or whether it was tuna fish and I'd eat it. But when I went up to college at age 18 in Ann Arbor, I wanted to continue that traditional observance. And the only thing that worked for me was the salad bar. That was 1977. And that's when I stopped eating animal foods. It just didn't work in the dorm. My parents visited a place in California called the Pritikin Center around the same time. And my mother started playing around with lentil burgers and kind of ahead of her time. So I was eating plant-based at college, plant-based at home, and I just kept it going, as did my girlfriend and now wife for many years. So, that wasn't a platform in practice. My platform in practice was stents and balloons and statins and blood pressure medicines. But as studies came out, and there was at least, growing database that nutrition was important in heart disease, and plant-based nutrition might be the most science-backed approach. Again, randomized studies, biochemistry, nutritional epidemiology, like Loma Linda and other databases. It became my platform to teach patients that the idea that they can halt and potentially reverse some of their atherosclerosis with nutrition, get rid of the junk, add in as many fiber-rich fruits and vegetables, grains and legumes, became increasingly supported by the science. So, yeah, but I think your original question was, we certainly can agree that this enormous deterioration in the American diet for at least 50, 60 years after World War II, moms going back to work, picking up carry out food, fast food, less time to cook, buying produce that was 3 weeks old from California here in Michigan at the grocery store, probably sprayed with some stuff to keep it brightly colored. And now we know it's being sprayed with the Bill Gates product called Appeal, which is a whole nother problem and controversy even on organic produce. The introduction of McDonald's and Arby's and Taco Bell and Coke and Diet Coke, all this amazing deterioration in our food. And, considering a donut and a Frappuccino on the way to work as food, has led to this enormous conundrum of 3/4 of us overweight or obese, and, 20 to 40% pre-diabetic and diabetic, and a heart disease rate and a cancer rate that really haven't budged as much as they should have by now. So sadly, you advocate cleaning up all that crap. I advocate cleaning up all that crap. And then we're left with clean diets, paleo diets, carnivore diets, Mediterranean diets, vegetarian and vegan diets. And for God's sakes, pick one of them and see what works for you. But if you have heart disease, I think you need to gravitate to plant-based diets based on science. There simply isn't any carnivore atherosclerosis research. There isn't really any paleo. There's, examining the Maasai and examining some other ancestral populations. But when we really talk the kind of technology we have nowadays, where we can measure plaque, document if it's progressing, reversing, and use an intervention like nutrition for a year, we just don't have it with a lot of that other data. So it's just caveat emptor, buyer beware. I just tell my patients, if you're going off into an animal-based, higher saturated fat diet, just check your labs 8 weeks later. See if you're a hyper responder when you put more saturated fat in your diet, because some people do double their cholesterol in 8 weeks, and they might want to consider whether that's what they really want to do long term. Other people don't. And I have a famous carnivore in my practice, a 60-year-old woman, and her cholesterol used to be about 250, and I could show you her data if it wasn't a consent violation, but she runs a cholesterol about 480 now. She's okay with it. I'm not really okay with it, but I'm going to watch her, and if we see her disease progress, she's got a little bit of vascular disease, we'll try and educate her. It's not working for her, but I'm not going to introduce my principles and say you're wrong, I'm always right. That's not fair.
I love that. Well, that's cool that you kind of accept these clean diets. I like hyper responder. Maybe that's a Dave Feldman type of thing, right? If the cholesterol goes up a lot. The studies, yes, I admit it's not studied well. For heart disease specifically, there are only studies that plant-based, and vegans love to show me those studies that it's the only plant-based, it's the only approach that is proven to reverse. I get it. Yeah, it's not studied otherwise, and I don't know who's going to fund it. I know Sean Baker got Harvard and was involved in getting the carnivore study, which was, I think, more of a retrospective. Do you know anything about that one? It wasn't.
I know he was advertising on social media to donate. I was tempted to donate just to be part of the game. But I haven't seen or heard anything since. And if it
it came out. It was great. It just wasn't the type of study that, it wasn't a double-blind controlled placebo, anything like that. It was just all these people resolving their symptoms, just amazing stories, and they got them all together.
I'm examining a certain cardiac technology right now, evaluating if I want to bring it in my practice. And I talked to the MD, CEO of the company, something that's been around for 20 years. And he sent me a bunch of Substacks. And I said, I'd like to see the science and read it because I'm asking my patients to pay a bit of money out of pocket. And I answered back, I love you, and Substacks are fun, but in academic medicine and other worlds, we don't consider Twitter, Instagram, and Substacks kind of the real basis of serious recommendations to
Yeah.
patients. And
Well, that's the problem. I wish there were studies that we could do, but just because there isn't studies doesn't rule it out that it's true and stuff.
yeah,
So
no, true.
yeah, it doesn't rule it. Okay, so then your position on for optimal human diet for longevity, do you have what is your sort of thesis on that? Do you have one for heart disease and do you have one for just general health?
Um, I think they align given the huge abundance of heart disease, and your listeners might be younger than me. I'm in my mid 60s, but we start to develop atherosclerosis in our 20s and 30s, and it can be documented. You just got to get a ultrasound of your carotid arteries or a CT scan of your heart. At some point, you'll find out if you have silent atherosclerosis, and you might want to start to track it. We're so passive about the fact that atherosclerosis develops for years to decades, and we wait for the event in the emergency room when you're 52 or 61 rather than start the process at age 30, 35. I have a lot of patients in their 30s that I've seen that come to see me, and they just want to be documented because of family history and get an early jump on things. And it's pretty shocking how much disease there is in young people. There's some, again, shocking studies from the Korea War, from the Vietnam War, and from Desert Storm of young soldiers that died from blast injuries and the amount of coronary artery disease that they had. Of course, 22 years old, unknown, but particularly the Korean studies were just scary. I think they're aligned. Dr. Walter Longo, just to bring that name back up, teaches a longevity diet that's about 18 meals a week of whole food, plant-based. And if you want to skip a meal, it's going to be less than 18 meals a week. If you're a 2-meal-a-day eater, I'm not a big fan of the OMAD diet, but a lot of my patients do it, either accidentally or purposely. And about 3 meals a week of seafood or fish as some diversity in the diet. That's his approach. Pretty academic guy with a lot of background behind it. I go 100% plant-based. I teach 100% plant-based, although I'm very accepting if people are in that range, 70, 80, 90 plus. Whole foods, not processed foods. And we've got to use those 5 pillars to examine, is that going to work? Because we're not going to have a study that shows it. I mean, there are, and these are controversial, but it's nutritional epidemiology. Maybe about a year and a half ago now, a group called the Global Burden of Disease Coalition, funded by the Gates Foundation, that already makes some people turned off, of course. But it's a study of millions and millions of people in, I think, about 190 countries, some dietary information and survival data. Very impressive publications in major journals. Not that journals are without their bias. We know that the journals can be bought by pharmaceuticals without a doubt. And the 3 top foods for longevity were whole grains, nuts and seeds, and legumes like beans. All of those added individually about 2 to 2.5 years of extra life over those that didn't eat those 3 foods. And the next 2 foods on their results, because I use these slides when I lecture at times, was a drop in survival with red meat and processed red meat. And of course, what's the quality of the meat and how was it finished and what were the animals fed and all those questions. That's data from a massive database. And, it's unclear, like the Loma Linda University Seventh-day Adventist studies and people criticize there's a church and religion influence, and are these really, biased studies because of the religious influence or the high science? These are all published in medical journals, but they could be, biased. The vegetarians that ate fish and the vegans had the best survival in their follow-up study. They were non-randomized. These were just questionnaires. But it is true that the vegetarians that ate fish had a little less heart disease than those who were 100% identified as vegan. You know, I will say this to your audience right now. I teach my patients, if you're 100% plant-based vegan, number one, do it whole food, do it clean, cook your food at home. Don't outsource it very often. You're going to find junk in restaurants usually. And if you're going to use oils, use olive oil, the highest quality extra virgin you can get. That's my preference for oils. And number two, I supplement. I want them. I use a multivitamin that has 8 nutrients: magnesium, vitamin K2, iodine, B12, selenium, vitamin D. I can't remember that, maybe number 8 right now. And so, you know, there are now a range of multivitamins for plant-based eaters that, based on some science, identify some pockets. I'm not ashamed to say, if you're in the gym lifting weights, throw some creatine in your diet. If you're a plant-based eater, we don't get a lot of creatine in the plant-based world. We may not get a lot of taurine in the plant-based world. And I use a lot of taurine in capsule form to treat high blood pressure naturally and palpitations naturally. So, you know, does that make it an unhealthy or undesirable diet if you're taking a multivitamin a day, or is that just smart? You know, so that's another debatable point. But you know,
Well,
I admit to my patients, you know, do it right, do it smart. We'll follow your blood work, and it's probably going to work out great.
but yeah, but my question would be, why would this be the optimal diet if it needs supplementation? And I'm sure
No,
you
but
get that question a lot.
I would. What diet doesn't need supplementation? And I say
True
that
ancestral diet.
these half a dozen carnivore patients in my practice, because if you don't do the blood work, you won't know. I mean, they have the lowest vitamin C levels that I've ever seen. They all come back flagged, you know, L
Well,
for low. None of my other patients are low.
yeah.
It's just a routine. I
Well,
check the
vitamin
vitamin
C is
level.
one of the easiest vitamins to get, and yeah,
I
that's
agree.
why I
You
don't.
know,
Yeah.
and is it harming their collagen production and their vasculature to be vitamin C deficient, even though they don't clinically have scurvy? I mean, their gums aren't bleeding, their skin isn't bruising, but you know, it's suboptimal. Frankly, unless you check, you know, even your audience, if you don't have omega-3 index blood levels, obviously simple ones like vitamin D, zinc, copper, selenium, vitamin C, vitamin E, you know, you won't know your nutrition status. And it may be that you are also deficient. I think if you test enough people, you're going to find a huge percentage with some vitamin or micronutrient deficiency, even on the cleanest of these variety of diets. Again, I hate to beat it up, but he's such a prominent figure. Despite teaching such a clean diet himself of plants and fish, Dr. Longo teaches a multivitamin every other day. He goes, I can't prove it. Nobody's going to do that study, but I think it's wise just to shower yourselves with a few extra micronutrients on the assumption that um, it's not clear that you're getting enough on any diet, particularly.
Well, yeah, in the modern world, a lot of diets are lacking, but the people eating the more meat-based diets, from what I've seen, are less lacking. This has the more bioavailable nutrition, and well,
You
this
know,
comes to the question of
they clearly get creatine and glycine and B12.
the fat
What
soluble vitamins,
is
and
the
yes,
trade
those.
off? Is the trade off? You know, there are well
Well, no
known
one.
ones.
I'm not advocating for
No, I
carnivore
know.
ever.
But
Yeah.
is the trade off the saturated fat, the low fiber, unless you're combining it with a good amount of, you know, fruits and vegetables and legumes?
Well,
And, you know, there's a couple oddballs out there, TMAO and New 5GC, which are metabolites that are important to learn about, and they're in the science, but they're largely issues with animal-based diets and not plant-based diets.
well, the
Oh, yeah.
TMAO thing. Well, yeah, but I remember the TMAO stuff where they try to say it's bad because red meat and it produces this in the gut. But then fish has way more TMAO than red meat, so everyone agrees that fish is good. So that doesn't really
Yeah,
pan
some
out.
fish. Fish sticks. Fish sticks are bad for your TMAO level. That cod can be high, but there are many fish are low in TMAO. But I wouldn't jump to say fish is healthy. There's actually very little fish atherosclerosis science. There's epidemiology again. If people are eating fish instead of cheeseburgers, they're probably better off. There are a couple basic science studies that suggest fish actually promotes atherosclerosis. And it's rather shocking to read it, but it is what it is. And, mice studies and rat studies and things like that.
Well, Walter Longo, I'll go with him. At least he enjoys the fish. Wait, so we got to figure out the diet stuff. Like, what is so my? I guess my position is that a diets include animal foods and whole foods. So whole foods diets with at least some animal foods are optimal for humans, and it's kind of based on the idea of what was good for any species throughout their evolution is optimal for them, and that we do not need to supplement. We never had supplements. No animals supplement unless you're in a zoo, and that's the whole thing, right? We're in a zoo right now. That's why we're so sick. We're basically in a big human zoo. But what humans ate for the most of history is what we should thrive on. And so there's another thing I've heard people do with debates is what would change your mind, right? You're like, if proven, what would change your thesis? So maybe you could tell me what would change your mind. And I would say for me, just before, yeah, is that, well, I mean, I know the ancestral history. I'm wearing this shirt from my friend, Dr. Bill Schindler, and he studies this. I've interviewed a lot of these people, that Brianna Pobner, that dug up the fossils, the bone remains of the woolly mammoth that had the cut marks on them. So for me, this modern science, yes, we haven't done enough science, but I know that there's basic science for a million years of human history of meat eating, and that unless that's falsified, I mean, that would be probably the only thing that would change my mind, is that if the cave paintings were fake of all the animals and all the cut marks, and Brianna Pobner's on some, secret list of spies that planted the cut marks on these mammoth bones. But I don't know, what, like, looking ancestrally, evolutionarily, or well, in general, what would change your mind about your position?
Yeah. Um, you know, I don't know about ancestrally. I think we have more than enough data that a human can live through reproductive years on a huge variety of diets and do what we're supposed to do, which is perpetuate our species, and we just got to make it to age 30 or 35, and we've probably left some offspring. And then, until about 100 years ago, that was about our lifespan. Lifespan went from age 40 to age 80 in the last 100 years, and was typically under 40, with many exceptions on individuals who exceeded that. But on average, we eliminated most infectious diseases and childhood deaths about 100 years ago, and we're left with survival of age 80 with a lot of chronic diseases in the last 10, 20 years of our life. But we know that there's a huge diversity that gets us there. And there's also a huge diversity that gets us a long lifespan. I mean, Okinawa, Japan in the 1950s had the longest lived men and women in the world. I mean, many centenarians. And their diet was studied, intensely. It's very different nowadays because you can find Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's on Okinawa, and their diet has been destroyed, basically. But, you've seen that. Animal protein was 3-4% of their diet. It's an island, so there is some fish around, but I think they ate some actual more animals than fish. And their diet was, 65% purple potatoes. I mean, very high polyphenol potatoes, but it was starchy, fibrous vegetables for the majority of the calories. And they did well, and they had very low documented heart disease and diabetes risk. They were thin and active. So we know you can fuel the body that way, and we're seeing examples ancestrally and currently that you can fuel the body with, almost completely opposite the diet. So we're able to tolerate a lot. I mean, we're all focused on, health span and lifespan. And I don't think we know the answer for the optimal diet for health span and lifespan. What would change my mind? Again, I practice as a cardiologist. I would like to see a study. Dr. Dean Ornish, MD, very famous research physician in San Francisco, may have done a slightly imperfect study published in 1990, the Lifestyle Heart Trial, but he did take 48 serious heart patients. They all had a heart catheterization at baseline 1 year and 5 years. Half of them ate like a typical Northern Californian for 5 years. Half of them ate a whole food plant-based diet with yoga and meditation and walking programs for the 5 years. And he documented using objective state-of-the-art technology from a heart catheterization that there was less and less plaque, more and more blood flow, better and better heart PET scan blood flow. Really high tech approaches. It only took 48 patients in 5 years and probably a couple $1 million, more expensive nowadays. If a study were done like that and documented, we could cut heart attack rates and hospitalizations in half, as happened in his study, and drop the progression of coronary disease and produce a regression of coronary disease, it would cause me to say to my patients, you have a diversity of diets that could reverse your atherosclerosis and lower your risk of events and lower your medical costs over the long term. We simply don't have that data. But if it were developed, I would be
Yeah.
obligated to ethically and
Mm,
scientifically teach it to them.
I like that. Well, I think uh, that we can do that, and that that would happen because maybe you're saying the flaws in the Orner study were that there were other lifestyle interventions like the yoga and this, and that kind of this healthy user bias and just other lifestyle bias and the small sample size that could produce those results. So, but I mean, that doesn't offend me either. That you can reduce heart disease with eating a clean diet, and I mean, I have no problems with say even going plant-based for a few months. Why not? This is probably evolutionary appropriate. We couldn't get animals, there was some severe weather, severe climate, and it's fine. Yeah, that doesn't falsify my opinion. I guess I'm just not one of these carnivore guys. Like, my opinion or my position is that there is an optimum human diet that includes animals, that it always includes animals. I guess I should say they're kind of, well, you talked about the diversity of diets, right? Yes, they're throughout the Okinawans, they eat very different, but they still got the animal foods, they still got that valuable nutrition from the animals, and that's fine. That's a perfectly good diet. And there's all populations. There's the Simone and the rainforests of Brazil, and yeah, I mean, they don't have tons of big animals just lying around to get.
Mhm.
So they eat the fish, they get their tubers, they get whatever they can, the fruits and vegetables. Great, they have low heart disease, fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's just, to me, I was going to say is there is an optimum diet and there's a fallback diet. And from my understanding of the research, talking to the paleoanthropologists, all these archaeologists, it's humans were after animal foods when we couldn't get it. It's great. It's great that when we couldn't get the animal foods, we have a biological adaptation to survive on plant foods. It's just the suboptimal nutrition. So it's basically people using this evolutionary hack of the fallback plan to lose weight. I get it. Yes, you go on a juice fast, you can lose weight, you can go vegan, you lose weight. This is great. It's you're eating. It's almost like fasting while eating. That's a little Walter Longo thing too. He's into this whole sort of like fasting type
Yeah.
of thing. It's you're barely getting enough amino acids from these plants, and you're trying to combine and get enough proteins, and I get why that can produce health for a lot of people, but I just don't think it's optimal, and that animal foods have always been that optimal nutrition. This is why there's the cave painting. This is why we got here.
It sounds so sexy what you say, but when you really, I mean, I don't know how old you are, mid
I'm
30s?
40.
Okay, 40, you look good. You know, what can you measure? I'm asking this scientifically, I'm not challenging you. Maybe you're eating low carb enough, you're in ketosis, you can measure that. I mean, you can do lots of blood work to see if your vitamin levels are optimal, your inflammation markers are optimal. I mean, we do have a panel of blood biomarkers that support health versus disease. And a real biohacker should be doing advanced blood work. I mean, you come to my clinic in Detroit, I'm going to run a carotid ultrasound on you and measure if you have any silent preclinical plaque or thickness of your carotid arteries called CIMT. And hopefully you don't. And at age 40, it'd probably be at a stage for, $100 in your hometown, you can get a heart calcium CT scan, which at age 40, you would certainly hope and expect it to be zero. It's not a perfect heart screen, but it's the best we have for $100, very accurate. Famously in 2017, when Sean Baker was maybe a year into his carnivore diet, he did publish, on Twitter that he had a calcium score of zero. 6 years later is a good interval to repeat that, and I've not seen him publish it again. I put mine out there. I'm a zero too. I'm older than him. And as about 18 months ago, it was still a zero. But we can't, people talk all the time about, and we're inducing autophagy through fasting, through other strategies, and we can't measure that. I mean, we really don't know. So, I mean, you're on a grand experiment. I'm on a grand experiment. I wish you well. I wish me well. But, do the hard work. The cost of getting advanced blood work and biomarkers associated with longevity, hemoglobin A1C, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, homocysteine, urinary antioxidants called isoprostanes. There's a blood marker called
My all my
galectin.
blood
I
works
would get I would
currently.
get my I would get my TMAO level. I actually had a series of emails with a patient this morning who's a very strict vegan, and her TMAO level is supposed to be less than 6. It's 10. And she's not on carnitine supplements, not on choline supplements. And we're both scratching our head. That's not a very high level, but it is abnormal. She's not a fish eater. So the most knowledgeable person in the world on TMAO is a professor at Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Stanley Hazen. So I emailed him. I've asked him this before on occasion, and I think I'm going to get the answer back again. We just don't know why. But I would check your TMAO level. I mean, I don't think it's a good idea to have a TMAO level of 40 or 80 or 100 like people I bump into my clinic. Usually it's supplementation. They're just taking a lot of choline or a lot of carnitine supplements. But, do that work, do your vascular assessment. There's a cancer screening blood test now called Gallery. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's blood, screens for 51 cancers. It's not a genetic test. It's the actual presence of occult cancer in the body. And you do that every couple of years. And, that should be an organized study. Let's take your group, my group, do these tests, track wellness. But, uh, I am by no means telling people I am certain I'm living to 100, despite now 46 years of, a really clean plant-based diet and daily fitness program and pretty good sleep. I think I'm on a pretty good trajectory, but I'm by no means bold enough to say I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to find out I've got, adenocarcinoma growing somewhere in my body. So I do the testing. I mean, that's what I want to
Yeah.
teach people. It's great to be excited about your path and your ancestral pattern of lifestyle, but we have the technology now to identify most chronic diseases early, even your propensity to Alzheimer's, know your ApoE. There's a new amyloid blood test that's not very expensive. It gives you some idea what's going on in your brain in terms of Alzheimer's risk. Those are the big ones. And, diabetes risk, know your fasting insulin and know your hemoglobin A1C. On your diet, you should have a pretty low fasting insulin and a pretty low hemoglobin A1C. But there is a lot of variability in how people respond to meat and hemoglobin A1C. So, just do the work. I mean, then just, I'm talking to you as if I were your
Yeah.
doctor.
Yeah.
I
No,
would, I would congratulate you on a great lifestyle. I would still test the hell out of you because
I yeah. So for one, I'll talk to Sean Baker. I know Sean. I'll see what's up if you can do another CAC score or whatever.
yeah,
Two, my blood
I'll
work.
call him right now. We'll get him. We'll do a three.
I mean, we'll see if he answers. I could text. Yeah. No, my blood work is currently at the lab, so we'll see my new stuff. I did do it 5 years ago when I was sort of more early in my journey, and it was great. Speaking of fasting, I mean, yes, all of my stuff was awesome. Uh, but what do you talked about your insulin kind of sensitivity, stuff like that, metabolic health? I think yes, your insulin sensitivity and metabolic health are closely aligned, right? Your blood sugar, stuff like that. Do you get into the triglyceride to HDL ratio?
That's a good question, and the answer is I don't anymore. I used to. This is just a side topic, but HDL is one of the most confusing topics in cardiovascular medicine right now. And if HDL isn't understood, then the ratios aren't understood anymore. I mean, there's just dozens of studies now that an elevated HDL is atherosclerotic. That's not what I was taught in medical school. Low HDL bad, high HDL good, super high HDL protective. Very famous cardiologist in the 1970s said, "Show me a person with an HDL over, I think it was 80. I don't remember the exact quote. I'll show you somebody who's never going to have a heart attack." Well, for reasons I don't understand, that science has been completely obliterated as recently as the last 2-3 weeks. A large study, particularly men with a high HDL, very high burden of atherosclerosis. So the point is,
What were
and
the other markers? Well, yeah.
so we talk
Yeah.
about HDL is a functional particle. It does reverse cholesterol transport along with other things. It has a big role in immune health. But HDL has the capacity to pick up cholesterol in the tissues, return it to the liver, and recycle it. And that's a function. We have no test for HDL functionality. And there was one or two introduced. They don't exist anymore. They must not have been very accurate or easy to perform. So again, if HDL is, no cardiology society right now actually puts HDL as a biomarker of importance because we are so puzzled by it. It's all about LDL, and in my world, LDL cholesterol and lipoprotein A cholesterol are the lipid particles of extreme importance, and then triglycerides would be there too. But
So low triglycerides, everyone can agree on.
everybody can agree on. I agree.
And then LDL is another one that could be good or could be bad. There's a whole other topic of we're studying a very unhealthy population. If you believe the statistics, between 88 and 93% of the US is metabolically unhealthy, right? The new one, the Tufts one was 93%. That's my main contention against a lot of this stuff that says, oh, well, yes, everyone eats meat because everyone loves meat because it's part of human history and it's healthy. But then everyone also is eating terribly. I know very few people that actually eat meat in a healthy way. And I'm not talking about eating grass-fed, grass-finished meat. Yes, of course, that's great. And that's what I do. But even I don't have a problem with people eating grocery store meat if they're eating a healthy diet in general. And I don't think many people are doing that, if that makes sense. I think there's a few percent, single-digit percent in the population that eats meat in a healthy way. That means eats paleo, eats, sapien, what I call sapien. So we're not studying these people. And if we are, they do have all the good blood markers. I mean, this is just anecdotal, right? We're getting anecdotal territory. You're looking at the people I know. I worked with a doctor who worked with patients. These people have low triglycerides, fine HDL. I don't really care about HDL. I mean, it's just like if it's between 50, 80, like whatever, it's all good.
Exactly.
I'm
That's
talking
a
about
good
more
place.
that their triglycerides are low so that their ratio is about 1-to-1. That to me is great. And what I've seen is that LDL is one of the least important markers if you're looking at all these other things. And also, if you do have high LDL, but you have everything else good, then that could be a different phenotype. That's like a different story. Like what's going on here, right? If you have 99 things that are good, but your LDL, like what if you had your triglycerides were like 40, your HDL, whatever, like 60, and your LDL was high, but you were thin, you had low CRP, low HbA1c, you know what I mean? Like the guy looks great. Everything's good. And then they had high LDL.
I see these people in my clinic all the time. I saw a patient this week. I don't recall every detail, but her total cholesterol was over 350. Her LDL was over 200 milligram per deciliter. That's high, probably genetic because she was an obese diabetic and ate relatively clean. But she has a calcium score of 0 and a carotid scan that was clean. Her docs are chasing her to go on a statin. And we talked about it. I think she should lower her cholesterol, but I would not put her on a pharmaceutical agent with a calcium score of 0 and a clean carotid.
What were her triglycerides?
I don't recall. They were not elevated, under 100. I don't remember the number. So, one exception doesn't break the rule that in a population, the higher your LDL cholesterol, the higher there's a trend towards developing cardiovascular events.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you're eating a bad diet and your LDL is high, yeah, I would say, that's not good.
But again, as a kind of high touch cardiologist, but a very high tech cardiologist, again, I want your audience to know it's easy to assess your own cardiovascular status, not your risk. Your risk is all kinds of calculators. You want to know your cardiovascular status, and you can look at your carotid arteries. You can do an ultrasound of your belly. That's not a very good one, actually, and an ultrasound of your legs. And you can do this CT scan called a heart calcium CT scan. And if you're on your path and those tests came out awesome, you probably don't need to alter your path. You should have a celebration, eat some snout to tail party. But if you're, there's a famous study, and this is certainly not going to be an example of super clean diets. There's a study in the last decade out of Madrid called the PESA study, PESA. They took 4,500 healthy 45-year-olds working at a bank, the largest bank in Madrid, and they offered them all 4 tests. They all had. They had a carotid ultrasound looking for silent plaque, a abdominal ultrasound looking for silent plaque, a ultrasound of their femoral arteries in their legs looking for silent plaque, and a heart calcium CT scan looking for silent heart calcified plaque. And up to 40% of these people had silent atherosclerosis. It did correlate with their LDL cholesterol in that study. Actually, the ultrasound of their femoral artery was the most productive, showed the most silent atherosclerosis. It was a pretty high smoking population, and smokers get leg atherosclerosis more than other people. There was only about, I think, 10 to 15% had abnormal heart calcium CT scans. But, doing that kind of relatively inexpensive workup, ultrasound in the neck can be $100, $200, and the heart CT scan can be $50. Or anybody's living in Cleveland, you can get it for free at the University Hospital in Cleveland. So it's an inexpensive test. But go down your path, but do the biohacking work. Do what Sean Baker did in 2017, but he needs to update it and put it out
we'll
there.
Check in. Yeah, we'll check in with him. But okay, let's go back to, for one, we didn't finish the fallback diet, and my kind of understanding is that when we got meat, we ate it for all of history. And do you think that there is this fallback plan that we can still eke out enough nutrition to live on the plant-based diet? Also, another anecdote, things, I'm in a different crowd, right? I kind of see the people that pick up the pieces from the plant-based diets. These people are very deficient, teeth falling out, lose their period, lose pregnancies, like gut problems. This is all I see, and my people, my doctors I interview, this is all we see. So to me, this is just a big indication that it is just the fallback plan that can be temporary, but it's not the optimum human diet.
Yeah, I don't see that. I see people with gas. That's their biggest downside. And again, I've been doing this. I've seen hundreds of thousands of patients, and honestly, I've been teaching.
Well, they're
them.
Coming to you. Yeah, I mean, certain people are coming to you.
But they're coming to me. Doc, I just had a stent and a heart attack, and I take a very detailed nutrition history. It wasn't plant-based. They're looking for a solution because what they were doing before didn't work, and it was a variety of clean to unclean American diets that preceded their heart attack. And nutrition's only one piece. They may have had a very strong genetic influence, or perhaps
a stress factor. Yeah, there's a lot of other factors.
And stress and all. So that's why we do very in-depth evaluation. No, I see people thriving on a diverse whole food plant-based diet, and maybe it's where they're getting their information. There's been for decades a bunch of ding dong vegan YouTubers that, a girl that eats mainly bananas. She's very popular and
well. Yeah, we won't talk about freely. No.
Yeah, exactly. A bikini wonder child and all. I mean, that's not the medical world. The medical world, looks like a Mediterranean diet pyramid, but there just isn't fish at the bottom. Maybe there's more legumes at the bottom, but it's a very diverse, some of the microbiome scientists in the medical world and plant-based world are talking about, eat 30 diverse fruits and vegetables a week, get some purples and whites and yellows and oranges and greens and red colored, that there's 1,000 kinds of beans. Don't just open a can of baked beans and call yourself a healthy vegetarian. The maple syrup may kill you, even though the beans may favor it, or the BPA lining in the can may kill you, or some such bastardization. So, it's pretty simple to teach people a clean, whole food, plant-based diet. And again,
these people are doing that,
that 2 to 3 months of their microbiome getting used to a high fiber diet and it being a bit of gassy. I think the human body clearly can thrive and do well on a diversity of diets. So I see victories in the plant-based world. People that reverse type 2 diabetes, reverse their blood pressure, lose weight, lose their psoriasis.
How long? I mean, yeah, maybe it's just more the long term, because I don't deny that at all for shorter term. Do you have a lot of data on these longer term people? Because I see the long term people, and it's a slow decline. They have the honeymoon because they found something that finally helps them eat less, junk, less calories. they lose some fat. Maybe they probably lose a lot of muscle too.
It is an interesting question. I mean, I'm just pondering when's the last time I saw an article on, 30-year vegans, 20-year vegans, 40-year vegans. I'm a 46-year vegan. I have many medical doctors, Dr. Joel Furman and Dr. Dean Ornish, who individually have done it for that long. There's a group out of Cleveland called the National Health Association that has hundreds of members that have been plant-based for nearly their whole life. But published data, I have to say, we obviously don't have a lot of long-term carnivore or paleo studies in the modern era. I'm not aware of a scientific study like yours that, we started with 500 and we ended up with only 100 that were still on the diet, or we ended up with 498 that are still on the diet. I'm not aware. It clearly, it's easier to have no rules. I grew up with food rules as a kid because of a religious background. I was used to food rules. It's way more fun to have no food rules when you go to a football party or a wedding or a high school graduation. No food rules is fun. No booze rules is fun. I mean, it's a great evening when you don't care what goes in your mouth or your body, but you're thinking before you eat and you say no to stuff. I'm thinking before I eat and say no to stuff. There's always going to be some people that drop off. I mean, it's a thoughtful, mindful, hard work approach to life. But I think it pays off in spades for most people.
But yeah, so we definitely see different people. But I mean, surely you're aware of all the YouTubers dropping off. I mean, do you think they were doing it wrong? I mean, I've interviewed some of these people. They were like, these are not just gimmicky people. Some of them are, absolutely. But I mean, I talked to people, they're like, I absolutely was doing everything right.
Well, I would like a chance to review that with them and see their blood work and evaluate it. Who is it? I think it's Chris Hemsworth was, one of the more famous recent examples. I was all plant-based. I got kidney stones. I'm out of here. I'm done with this damn plant-based diet. That was about 2-3 years ago. And I've never interviewed Chris Hemsworth, but it's reported his smoothie was like a pound of spinach every day. Well, that's not 30 diverse fruits and vegetables a week. Spinach is a high oxalate food. It's a great food to have, once or twice a week. It's probably not a great food to put a pound every day in your smoothie if you have a propensity to form oxalate stones. I've never had an oxalate stone, and I eat a lot of spinach, but there's a lot of diversity in humans. So, it's little subtle things like that. It seems like there's actually this week. I mean, just talk about how interesting food science is. That blueberries are very rich in polyphenols and antioxidants. And bananas rotten quickly. That's why they turn brown, like apples. And there's actually an enzyme that causes them to oxidize quickly and turn brown. And it turns out if your habit is to put blueberries in your smoothie and a banana in your smoothie, you actually lower the antioxidant power of that smoothie because of the banana input. Somebody did that study, and it's in a medical journal this week. It actually made headlines all over the world. People just get off. So, I mean, if you can have such a subtle little, nuance, that a pound of spinach a day may look like a good idea, but could have a detriment. That a banana in a smoothie with blueberries might not be as good as eating your banana at 11 and doing your smoothie at 8. I mean, we've got a lot to learn. And I'm sure the same nuances exist, in a paleo-oriented diet.
Do you think that we going back to ancestral past? I mean, we didn't have Whole Foods Market and whatever else people are doing to get the 30 different things. I don't think that is what is required to be healthy. So going back, do you deny, for one, meat eating throughout history, or do you just think, they got to 35 and they died? Or what's your position on meat eating throughout history? And then what also the fact that we did not have a cornucopia of fruits year round and this and that year round. I visited the Hadza and the Maasai in Tanzania 2.5 years ago, went to Uganda. I got to see it. They were after meat. There was not a lot of animals around, right? Before there was giant megafauna roaming the earth. Those got, disappeared for one way or another 12,000 years ago, whatever. Then recently, all the big animals are in the game reserves. They don't have access to those. Still, they can get animals very successfully. I went hunting with them for 8 hours. We almost got dehydrated and it was bad. But they got their animals and they ate them. And yes, there were some women back at the camp digging up some tubers and they bake them on the fire, and then they gnawed on them, and then they spit out this fiber. They were not eating fiber. This is a whole nother topic too. These people, when you're eating those tubers, it's like chewing on uh, uh, sugar cane. You don't eat the sugar cane. It's pure cellulose. You chew on it, you get some sweetness, and that's it. So these people can still successfully get animal foods, and they had, maybe they found some berries, they found some honey, right? They chewed on some tubers.
Yeah. Just since you brought up sugarcane, Dr. Longo just came out with a longevity vitamin. It's not being sold yet, but I got a couple packets at a time. And actually, there's a polyphenol in sugarcane that I never heard of called polynol, Polynol, and it's in this vitamin. I thought that was going to repel a lot of people. You put sugarcane in your longevity vitamin, but it turns out it's a non-absorbable polyphenol that doesn't raise your blood sugar. And there actually is pretty deep science that it has some pro longevity lifespan, at least in animal models. So I would never fault Dr. Longo for not having thought about all that. And I do eat yucca, a lot of yucca. My daughter-in-law is from South America, and she introduced that to our family. And it's almost like eating the tubers you talk about. It can be a pretty rough go to get through the fiber. No, I don't, there's no doubt that meat has been part of our ancestral heritage. I grew up in a meat-eating house till age 18, my personal experience. But is it necessary for longevity? Is it compatible with 10 million people on the planet? 10 billion, I'm sorry. Is it compatible with the fact we no longer are dealing with a high incidence of infant mortality, birth mortality, infectious diseases, and we're dealing with chronic diseases? And does it take a new perspective to deal with age 40 to age 80 to 90? I think it's impossible to say that whole food plant-based diets don't provide a lot of support for health, and may not be the only path, but are clearly a well-documented path.
But so we know humans can live to 120, right? We've seen it. Even in the modern world with bad air, unclean water, all that, So we know humans can live to 120, right?
Gene Clement, 122. I think that's the oldest documented.
There's multiple people. Yeah, there's some 120, a lady 118, whatever. So we know it's possible. So why? So this whole thing where we didn't live that long, it's like we know that even with suboptimal diets and lifestyle, we can still live that long. So if we did have an optimal diet and lifestyle, I think we can easily live to 120. I mean, this is sort of neither here nor point to our argument, but it's interesting.
It overlooks genetics. We do a lot of genetic testing in my clinic, and lifestyle is an important feature. But actually, right now in cardiovascular disease, the latest estimates are 30 to 40% of heart attack, strokes, early death is actually genetic input. You can have that perfect vegan and perfect paleo diet and still have a heart attack or stroke, because an easy one is lipoprotein little a, completely genetic.
But do you think that? Because my idea of why the genetics, like
I see people
with Alzheimer's
all the time. I see people frequently
but who's
on
eating
super
the good
clean,
diet?
healthy diets that have cardiac events, and it's not their lifestyle; it's their heavy genetic burden. And we're getting better and less expensive to actually do those genetic panels. ApoE, about ApoE, 9p21, ApoC3. I mean, we're really still infantile on it, but you can do the panels now. And I think lipoprotein A is the most important one. Everybody listening should get a blood test called lipoprotein little a and find out if you're one of the 1.8 billion people in the world that inherited from their parents and puts you at genetic risk for early atherosclerosis. And there is no diet that consistently lowers lipoprotein little a. So that's why the pharmacology industry is going gaga right now, creating drugs at the cost of $1 billion a piece to come up with a market for 1.8 billion people. But know your risk. But that's why I don't think there's a single diet that guarantees longevity. They all may promote it, but then your genetics come along, let alone warfare and car accidents and all the other things that go in the equation. But genetics is a powerful factor.
Well, to me, the genetic thing in general is more that you can have a genetic susceptibility, and that if you have less margin of error, right? And if you're living the modern diet and lifestyle, you have less margin of error. And I'd say 96% of people, 98% of people don't live correctly. So yes, then those genes will express and you'll have those problems. But just to me, generally, how the genetic idea works with humans is that we wouldn't be passing along these genes. Like I don't really buy that we just have this and we're screwed. We're just doomed to get heart disease. I don't see that
There's
in animals.
there's a theory why we still have lipoprotein little a, that it's prothrombotic, and if you're a woman delivering a baby and you're hemorrhaging, you might have a survival advantage to have at age 24 a inherited cholesterol that also is prothrombotic, so maybe you stop bleeding quicker. But then you're 64 years old in modern society and you've got a bad heart valve and bad heart arteries, and you're way past, those birth years of bleeding. That's kind of the theory behind why it's still in the population. And there are some, actually, that's what I was thinking. You mentioned the Tsimane in Bolivia, that some people call it Chimane. They have an incredibly high penetration of ApoE, and they don't have much heart disease or much Alzheimer's. And people are trying to study, why is that? Is it the parasites, the parasites in their gut, or are they walking 25,000 steps a day, or the diversity of their diet, which is about 75% plant-based in their native culture, but they have very little coronary calcification, which is, interesting studies in the last 10 years.
Well, that's one of my points. And there's another group that I think has really high LDL, but they still have no heart disease. And it's just, to me, it's just like, yes, this is not a good marker, that they are living the appropriate diet and lifestyle and they're doing fine. And that we just have the wrong view of these markers. They're just markers.
I don't agree with that. I think if you have a high LDL, you do cardiovascular testing. And if you have totally normal cardiovascular testing, then you can choose to ignore that biomarker. It's just one risk factor of 25 plus risk factors. And you can get a heart attack with a normal LDL, and you can get a heart attack with a high LDL. But just, we have the technologies. I've said several times, never assume that it's an innocent biomarker until you've checked your own arteries, because you may get burned badly for ignoring it.
Well, I agree. People getting tested. I don't want to go too long, but what do you think about Weston Price and his work?
Yeah. They've been very ugly to the vegan community. They haven't had this nice bridge of communication. I don't find them particularly relevant or impactful in my career. I've read their materials. Sally, I'm blanking at Fallon. I wouldn't consider her, a friend of good science. They're really zealot. I'm not zealot.
Right, well, never mind about the organization.
My whole medical practice, and I think a good physician's medical practice, better be science-based, literature-based, nutrition, epidemiology-based, and you want to stay away from zealot approach. And clearly he did some fascinating research on dental and nutrition correlations. But it's one small piece of a very large nutrition world. I don't find them particularly powerful.
Oh. So yeah, screw the organization. Let's talk about the guy and his work. So you're just saying it's a small piece, because to me there's a breadth of things that we need to look at. We need to look at the paleoanthropologic data. We need to look at modern science. We need to look at everything in between, clinical data. We need to look at anecdotes. We need to look at it all. And to me, the totality of the evidence does show that we need whole foods and we need animal foods. Animal foods, we just know the nutrition. We know the bioavailable nutrition of an egg. Very simple science. Egg, choline.
Some of your people go crazy about Dr. Price's, journeys and reports, and they ignore Colin Campbell and the China study, which,
the China study cherry-picked data too.
Okay, so let's not go there, because we're never going to agree on that. We're talking chief of the department of Cornell, esteemed physician, not a dentist. A book that sold 5 million copies, and that's not the criteria. It's the fact it was based on peer-reviewed data. But you can't say it's all Weston Price and Colin Campbell had nothing to contribute based on, basic science and then transitioned. I'll piss all your people off. You can't say it about Ansel Keys. Did basic science, did lab science, did metabolic ward science, and then went out to 7 countries, not 22 countries. Don't you dare say 22 countries, because you're showing ignorance if you say 22 countries. I know Ansel Keys' data back and forth. I'm his biographer. But he did the whole range of science to conclude saturated fat in the diet can raise LDL cholesterol, and there's a statistical association with more coronary heart disease. And places like Finland in the late 60s that reduced their saturated fat intake had an 80% drop in heart attacks in 5 years. I mean, that's just one small piece of the entire data, but you can't glam on to Dr. Weston Price and ignore these other powerful and fairly similar, nutritional epidemiology, cultural reviews there have been done. They're all difficult science. They all have flaws, but
Well, Ansel Keys, yeah, we're gonna do a whole episode, not a section of
bring me
episode on
back.
that.
I'm his biographer. I've published on him. I've read all
Well,
his papers.
maybe we have to
Know
interview.
his family. I know his family, Dr. Henry
Well,
Keys.
I'd love to know because I think that for his time he had some decent theories. They just didn't happen to be true. When we did more studies, when we reinterpreted the data. Did you read the Big Fat Surprise? I'm curious.
Well, his theories are accepted by every medical group around the world that's a cardiovascular group, so they exist to this day, and we can. There is not a medical group of cardiologists in the world that do not recommend a low saturated fat diet, which was his message. It was not a low fat diet. If you read Dr. Ansel Keys' cookbooks, I have them all in my office 10 feet away. I wouldn't eat this stuff. I mean, it's dripping in fat, but it's not saturated fat. It's heavy extra virgin olive oil, occasionally, cheese and butter. He was the farthest scientist from being a vegan in the world, but, nonetheless, as people may know, he lived to 101 years. Himself, his wife lived to, I think, 98. That's just an example. That's not a guarantee. Although it's really interesting. Ansel Keys had 17 co-scientists that all his studies, particularly the 7-country study, were done with. And the longevity in those 18 scientists, Dr. Jeremiah Stamler just died last year at Northwestern at 102 years old. My friend Henry Blackburn, MD, was one of those scientists, and he's 98 playing the piccolo or something in like a jazz band in Minneapolis. It's pretty amazing what they've personally experienced from following the Mediterranean diet, as was described by Ansel Keys long term.
Well, I don't know how good they follow this diet, but also Mediterranean diet sounds great. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, why not? To me, that's it. There's nothing wrong with that. Getting some good meat, some good fat, some good fish. Yeah. Did you ever read The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz?
Yeah, I've written many blogs about Nina. She blocked me on Twitter long ago. Yeah, I've read the book. I have it again in my office, literally 10 feet away.
What are your thoughts?
I don't honor her science. I don't honor her effort. I don't honor her bias. I think she twisted and, again, used the word cherry picked. I think it was a very cherry picked book. You don't hear much about her anymore. I don't know why that is, actually. Maybe she is out there and I just can't see her because she's blocked me everywhere. It's not a program I would recommend to any cardiac patient.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep you forever, but yeah, I think
everybody,
that was good.
Get your heart checked, get your lipoprotein A checked, do your biomarkers, examine if your lifestyle is working for you. Don't assume it is. I tell that to anybody, anywhere.
That's a good last topic then. Just kind of to wrap things up is that people need to find the diet and lifestyle that work for them, because I think most of the benefit is in being a healthy body composition, right? So it's like there are many diets that can lead you to a healthy body composition. You look like you have a pretty good body composition. Yeah. But I'm like, okay, you're figuring out a way to be healthy at 60 something, I guess you said.
64.
And
64.
And you figured out a way to have a healthy body. That's great. How can people find that healthy body composition? I say they find it very easily with animal foods that helps with the satiety, that gives them all these protein bioavailable nutrients. They have an easy time eating less, getting a lot of micronutrients at the same time, protein, keep their body mass, keep their, lean muscle mass while dropping fat. And this is a perfectly amazing way, consistent with evolutionary history, to become a good or have a good body composition. So do you think that really is a lot of it? A lot of it is just
Yeah, I see people with good body compositions die of heart disease all the time. So
Well,
that's what I'm
visceral fat
stressing
is a
again.
huge topic too.
Go beyond your scale and your BMI and your
Oh,
bench
visceral
press.
fat. Yes.
And visceral fat is a very important biomarker, no doubt. But you know, again, it's really simple to go beyond that and directly assess your biomarkers for cardiovascular disease. I mentioned a lot of them, and actual vascular testing. It's very simple to arrange a carotid ultrasound and a heart CT scan. Not at 21, but from age 40 up, it becomes increasingly important.
Well, I'm glad to hear that a lot of people in the animal-based community do those tests and have zeros and have great success.
Yeah, on average, it's about 50% of the public at age 45 to 50 is a zero. So it's a decent chance you are, but my clinic is
Yeah.
full of the others. The
Well, yeah,
ones that,
and I shouldn't say just body composition. I really mean metabolic health as
yeah,
well, because there's a guy, Dr. Sean O'Mara, that does a lot of MRI scans and looks, and he actually showed his colleague, a plant-based doctor, was filled with visceral fat, same waist circumference as him, so he looked like he had a good body composition. Sean O'Mara has almost no visceral fat. Vegan doctor, full of visceral fat.
yeah, I agree. DEXA scan, body composition or an in-body scale for lean body mass and fat mass, visceral fat mass are very important tests.
Yeah. Well, pretty good stuff. We did it. Thanks for coming on. Where do people find you if they're interested in this stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, physically, I'm in southeastern Michigan, suburb of Detroit, and website drjoelkahn.com, drjoelkahn.com, kahn.com. Podcast, books, clinic, social media all the time, like you, where I found your great stuff. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you so much.